Throughout my whole life, I have always had encounters with demonic ghosts. It's as if I alone summon them into the open. There doesn't seem to be any link that I have found as to why or where they show up. I always sense their existence, and while I do not initiate them in any way, I am regularly attacked by them. This was the case when I was staying in a motel room on the East Coast one night when I was just about 9. Although the bed was unpleasant to sleep on, the long hours in an overcrowded car back seat had left me tired and sore. So when I had the capability to finally stretch out on the bed, it wasn't long before I floated off to sleep. I was dreaming I was in the motel room, which I found a little strange at the time because I hadn't really paid attention to what it looked like, so a lot of the things on the wall were blurry and without any clarity. I felt a tingle at the base of my neck, my usual indicator. I turned around, and an evil spirit evaporated into the room. It was about as tall as I was, 5.5 feet, and looked like a living, shapeless shadow. I immediately felt that this spirit was evil and began to pray in order to banish it like I typically do when facing spirits of this kind. It opened its mouth and let out a scream that left me paralyzed. Unable to physically move or speak, I channeled my energy and, with my spirit, let out a yell of my own. I had the sensation that I was falling backward. When I was about to hit the ground, I jolted awake. The spirit again appeared, and I realized I had only woken up in my dreams. The confrontation resumed, with the evil spirit attacking me with its screams and my attempting to banish it with shouts of my own from my spirit. I again fell backward, and finally was able to wake up, for real this time. I dismissed it as just a bad dream brought on by being in a strange room, and quickly fell back to sleep. The spirit continued to show up in my dreams again and again. We continued our duel 2 more times before I woke up in the morning. I now believe I was fighting the spirit that dwelt inside that room while I was asleep. When my mom had woken up that next morning, I sat her down and told her what had happened the night before. She had heard some of my tales of encountering these evil entities, so something like this wasn't a surprise to her. I didn't have to convince her I was telling the truth. My mom believed me when I told her this type of story. She got up, turned on the lights, and began speaking to the spirit. She demanded that it leave the room because it was no longer welcome and must leave at once. After my mom had spoken, the air in the room did in fact feel lighter, as if a weight had been released within the space. We did stay in that room for a couple of more nights after that. I didn't have any more dreams about ghosts or demonic spirits while we were there, and I was sure after our battle and my mom's message, the spirit had been forced out. My best friend Emma, her boyfriend Todd, and I had been at a wedding when this happened. We all had been drinking, and Todd, being the least drunk, had been pushed into service to get us home almost 3 hours away. Light-headed and still a bit tipsy himself, we all agreed that it would be best if we were to stop for the night at a cheap motel and get started driving again in the morning. Quickly, they both agreed. We stopped at the next town and found a budget motel with a generic motel sign out front. Todd parked his car in a nearby lot, and we piled out and walked over to the office. Our senses were assaulted by an overpowering fragrance of jasmine as we walked through the door. A young woman in her early 20s was at the desk who greeted us. Not having a lot of money, we could only afford to rent one room for the night, so we were going to be forced to share. The girl handed us a key and told us to go out and turn right, and the room was 4 doors down. We decided to leave our bags in the car, figuring it would make things quicker when we were leaving in the morning. So empty-handed, we walked over to the door and turned the key. The place wasn't great, to say the least. It smelled of cigarette smoke, and there was only one full-sized bed with a small couch against one wall. Ever the gentleman, Todd, told us we could have the bed and he would crash on the couch. I basically fell onto the bed and was out within minutes. Around 5:30 a.m. the next morning, I was shaken awake by Emma, who wore a look of terrified panic on her face. She was pointing to the bathroom and the bed frantically. I couldn't really understand what she was saying, given I'd only been awake for about 10 seconds at this point. "What?" I asked groggily. "Amy, we have to get out of here. Now get up!" she yelled at me. She'd nearly dragged me out of the room in her panic. I was thankful that we had decided to leave the bags in the car, because it seemed that if we hadn't, we would have left them behind. Todd's hair was wet, and he was pushing us both out of the door, looking grave. Within a matter of minutes, we all had jumped into Todd's car, and he was driving away, blowing way beyond the speed limit. I'd finally been awake long enough to get my head thinking clearly. Confused, I asked Emma what was going on. She told me that around 3:10 a.m., Todd got up to take a shower. While in there, he heard a piercing female scream, and he suddenly felt a burning sensation on his back. He quickly got out to look, and there he saw 3 long scratches about 8 inches long that looked like they were made by fingernails. Emma said that she saw a lady with pale skin and long black hair sitting next to me, running her fingers through my hair a few seconds before Todd had run out of the shower. I felt a little scared too. Who was this lady who was playing with my hair while I slept? We didn't check out of the motel in the morning. We were in too much of a rush to get away. We certainly don't plan ever to go back again. I've always been scared of ghosts. It was never a question of whether or not they existed, but if you would come into contact with them. Luckily for me, I had never come face to face with a ghost. That was, until I went to a wedding ceremony for one of my cousins. We were only planning to stay for a couple of days, and I was excited to see the people I hadn't seen since I left. All that changed the first night we were there. I had been helping my mother make some of the traditional dishes that are served. It being March, the weather was nice, especially with a slight breeze keeping the humidity at bay. The preparations lasted all day, and by the time darkness was falling, I was more than ready to go to sleep. We were staying in a hotel that was just outside the village. By American standards, it was little more than a collection of small huts, so you could only fit 1 or 2 people in every one. Each hut was round in shape and about 10 feet across. They had an arched opening with a canvas flap across the door. I walked into the room and got dressed to go to sleep. The cool night made the room comfortable, and I was asleep within minutes of my head hitting the pillow. The room had gotten really cold, and I was about ready to get up and grab a second blanket. That is, when I felt the bed depress right next to me. It surprised me because I wasn't sharing a room with anyone, and it wasn't like anyone in my family to just show up in the middle of the night. I felt a weight shift towards me, and it was like a hand was running itself through my hair. I could feel the fingers as they combed through the strands down the entire length of my hair. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to see who was doing this to me. I turned over, and the room was empty. The place where I felt someone sit on my bed didn't even have a mark on it. My eyes darted left and right, looking into the shadowed parts of the room, thinking that maybe one of my young cousins was playing a trick on me, and they were trying to hide. But that didn't explain the drop in temperature. I felt a cold breeze from behind me, which was impossible since there was no window there, and the canvas flap on the door in front of me lay still. That is when I realized what was going on. One of my first fears was coming true. I squeezed my eyes shut and held my covers to my chin, just willing the spirit to leave. I sat that way for probably 10 minutes. I don't even know when the room's temperature returned to normal. I didn't sleep another minute that night. I sat up in bed with the light next to the bed on and was trying to watch as much of the room as I could. Even if I had tried to sleep, I'm not sure it would have been possible. The next morning, I told my mother what had happened, and she got a terrified look on her face. I didn't need to ask her if she believed what I was telling her. I already knew. She and I slept in the same room together for our final night, hoping that we would have safety in numbers. Thankfully, nothing happened, and I was able to get a few hours of sleep before we had to catch our flight later the next day. That night confirmed all my fears about ghosts. I haven't been back to my village since I was visited that night. I know I wouldn't stay in that hotel if I did go back. I'm not up for an encore performance.
For more creepy true stories and real haunted houses, be sure to like and subscribe and never miss an episode. Submit your own story on Reddit at Chilled Bones Writes, and thanks for watching our scary stories.